We've asked a question that I think the world asks as we started this new series. I think whether you're religious or not religious, I think if you've spent any amount of time on the planet, you will ask this question. What is wrong with the world? Like, what is wrong with the world? It doesn't matter where you're from. This is a question that I think that gets asked. And as we're studying, as we're diving into the Word of God, as we're asking this question, we're coming to a very poignant, a very straightforward, it's a 3-letter answer. The problem with the world is sin. The problem with the world, it's surprise, it's sin. It's all sin. It all works its way back to sin. So what I want you to do for a second, I want you to picture with me when you bake bread, right? You mix flour. It takes actually a lot of flour. Tamara makes the communion bread, and at the end of the month, after doing it for a whole month, we go to make something, and then we're like, where's all our flour? Like, what happened to all of our flour? Well, yeah, we've been baking bread. It takes a lot of flour. And you add water, you add salt, and then you add, depending on the bread you're baking, not communion bread, regular bread, you would add yeast. And yeast doesn't look impressive. It's very, very small. It comes in little tiny packages, right? That's how they sell yeast. It's invisible once it's mixed in. It's quiet. But given time, once it's mixed into the dough, it spreads, and it'll change the entire dough. It'll change everything. And that's going to be the image Jesus is going to use when he talks about sin. If we look at Mark chapter 8, starting in verse 11, we see this, that the Pharisees came and began to question Jesus. To test him, they asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply, and he said, "Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, no sign will be given to it." Then he left them, got back into the boat, and crossed to the other side. Check this out. The disciples had forgotten to bring bread. Sounds like me after my wife tells me to go to the store. They forgot bread except for one loaf that they had with them in the boat. "Be careful," Jesus warned them. "Watch out for the yeast of the Pharisee and that of Herod." They discussed it with one another, and they said, "Well, it's because we have no bread." Aware of their discussion, Jesus asked them, "Why are you talking about having no bread? Do you not see or understand? Are your hearts hardened?" All right, let's go back to the beginning. The Pharisees demanded a sign, and Jesus sighs deeply. That tells us something. It tells us that this wasn't curiosity on the Pharisees' part. It was pride. They weren't searching for truth. They were testing him. And Jesus warns his disciples, watch out for the yeast of the Pharisee. He wasn't talking about literal bread. He was talking about something spreading beneath the surface. And so the first truth today that we're going to look at for sin is that sin works like yeast. Sin works like yeast. It spreads quietly. It works internally. And left unchecked, it changes everything. You know, you can't see yeast once it's kneaded into the dough. In fact, if two bakers had made dough, one had yeast and one didn't, externally, you would not be able to tell. You'd have no idea which one, until you started to bake it. It gave it some time for these to work. They look exactly the same from the outside, but internally, they are completely different. And that's how sin operates. You can look moral, you can attend church, you can serve, you can give, and still have yeast in the dough. That's what Jesus kept trying to show the Pharisees. They were obsessed with their outward behavior, ritual washing, rule following, religious performance, but Jesus kept pointing to the heart. The real issue wasn't what people saw or could see. The real issue was what God sees. Jesus asked his disciples, "Are your hearts hardened?" That's the danger of yeast. It doesn't just affect actions. It hardens the heart. It's a slow internal erosion. Right? It's a resentful thought here. It's a prideful assumption there. It's a small compromise. This isn't a big deal. And if we don't deal with it, it spreads. Jesus also mentioned the yeast of Herod. That's interesting, right? Herod represents worldliness, power, approval, politics, self-protection. The Pharisees' yeast represents religious pride. Two very different groups, same yeast. You can be religious and still full of pride. You can be worldly and still full of pride. Different packaging, same yeast. And here's where this becomes deeply personal. There's a spirit of sin. And the spirit of sin says, your life for mine. It says, I deserve this. I come first. I will secure myself. I will protect my image. I will choose comfort. Then there's a spirit of grace. And the spirit of grace says, my life for yours. It says, I serve. I sacrifice. I forgive. I give. And I trust. I think every single day, I know, every single day you have an opportunity to choose which spirit you're going to live by. Every day, every morning, every afternoon, every moment. You have this opportunity. Right? I think a small example of this, you're in the grocery store, right, and you're in line and someone cuts in front of you. What is your immediate thought? Let's be honest. I was here first. Has anyone even said that? You don't have to be shy. I've said it. I was here first. Hold up. What's going on? It's a minor thing. It's probably even a natural thought. But underneath that reaction is the yeast of your life for mine. But when you say, you know what, go ahead. Even if it costs you a few minutes, that's a very minor example of my life for yours. Again, that sounds minor, but yeast spreads. Small decisions form habits. Habits form character. Character forms your future. And here's the danger. I think sin is strongest when it's quiet. When you aren't troubled by it. When you aren't examining your heart. When you aren't offended, or when you're offended at the idea that you could be wrong. That's when yeast is working most effectively. The disciples here, they completely misunderstood Jesus' warning. They thought he was talking about literal bread. You forgot the bread. But Jesus is saying, you're missing it. This isn't about bread. This is about your heart. How often do we miss it? Right? The real issue isn't external shortage. It's internal infection. And you guys, if we don't deal with internal infection, it will eventually surface. You know, yeast left in the dough long enough turns the entire dough sour. It'll consume all the sweetness. I don't think we can just isolate sin into one corner of our heart and expect it to stay there. Oh, it's just over there. I'm good everywhere else. I'm good. It spreads. You know, Apostle Paul, he's going to use the exact same metaphor here. 1 Corinthians 5:6, don't you know that a little yeast leavens the whole batch of dough? You know, Jesus said it. Paul said it. I wonder if it's important. I wonder if this is a really important metaphor. So what exactly is this yeast? What is sin at its core? Is it just rule breaking? Is it just bad behavior? I think to answer that, we've got to look below the surface to the level of roots. And there's actually a powerful image from Scripture. Jesus shows us what sin does to the image of yeast. Well, the prophet Jeremiah is going to show us where sin begins. Jeremiah 17, starting in verse 5, says, this is what the Lord says, cursed is the one who trusts in man, who draws strength from mere flesh, and whose heart turns away from the Lord. That person will be like a bush in the wastelands. They will not see prosperity when it comes. They will dwell in the parched places of the desert, in a salt land where no one lives. But blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. They will be like a tree planted by the water that sends its root out by the stream. It doesn't fear when the heat comes. Its leaves are always green. It has no worries in years of drought, and it never fails to bear fruit. The heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Oof. Who can understand it? I, the Lord, search the heart, examine the mind, to reward each person according to their conduct, according to what their deeds deserve. There's two trees in this passage. One's a desert shrub. The other is a tree flourishing by a river, a stream, right? The difference is not in their appearance at first. The difference is where their roots are placed. Jeremiah says, cursed is the person who trusts in man and draws strength from mere flesh. The blessed person trusts in the Lord and whose confidence is in him. This issue is about trust. Sin is not first about behavior. Sin is about misplaced trust. It's putting our roots into something other than God. So think about roots. Think about, we'll go into herbology for a second here. Trees, roots, what do? Well, they anchor the tree, right? They draw nourishment. Deep roots means that the tree can withstand powerful winds and whatever else is going on. It also means that it's drawing nutrients and water and whatever from a vast, wide resource area. Okay, so what does that mean about us for our roots? Our roots are our stability when times get hard. Our roots are our strength. That's how we survive in times of drought. Jeremiah says the person who trusts in man is like a bush in the wastelands. If you notice the next part of that phrase, it says, they will not see prosperity when it comes. That means like rain's going to fall, but the bush will not benefit in any sort of lasting way. It's adapted to barrenness. By contrast, the tree doesn't fear when the heat comes. Not if the heat comes, not if, but when the heat comes. The difference is not the weather. The difference is the water source. We all go through heat. We're all feeling the heat, so to say. Financial heat, relational heat, medical heat, cultural heat, whatever it is. The question is not whether heat comes. The question is, where are your roots? Jeremiah says something even more piercing after that. He says the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? That's humbling. If you're really thinking about that phrase, that's humbling, right? I think we often think we know ourselves. We'll just say, well, I'm just stressed. I'm just frustrated in this one moment. I'm just tired here in this one microcosm of this situation. It has nothing to do with anything else ever. But Jeremiah says the heart deceives us. We may think we trust God, but functionally our roots may be in something else. So let me give you guys some questions. Self-examination time, right? This is really good. What do you fear most? What do you fear losing most? What, if taken from you, would cause you to say life ain't worth living anymore? What do you worry about constantly? Maybe it even sounds like, what are you asking God to not put in your life? Don't give me, God, don't let me be the one who loses a job. God, don't let me be the one who has a family member with cancer. God, don't let me be the one that has a kid with health issues. Don't let me be that person. Whatever your answer is, that's likely where your roots are. Let me ask you the next part of this. Where does your mind wander when you're alone? Where does your mind go to for comfort? Right? Do you replay achievements? Are you living in the past? Living in the glory days? Focusing on all of that stuff? Are you fixated on the future? You got big plans. You're looking forward to the big house, the new car, the big trip. You think about financial security. Maybe it's not future or past. Maybe are you discontent with what you have? What our mind rests on reveals what we trust in. We all have faith in something. Everybody has faith in something. Some people trust success. Some people trust reputation. Some people trust control. Some people trust political outcomes. Some people trust their own moral performance. But here's the sobering part. I think you can trust in the Lord in a general sense, but not make him your ultimate trust. Jeremiah says, blessed is the one who trusts in the Lord, whose confidence is in him. That second phrase intensifies the first, right? If deep down the thought is, as long as God gives me this outcome, I'll follow him, then our real trust is in outcomes, not the Lord. That's what happened with Pharisees earlier. They demanded a sign. Why? Well, because they had conditions. Well, if you prove yourself our way, we'll believe, but grace doesn't operate on conditions. People may think, if God fixes my marriage, then I'll trust him. If he heals me, then I'll trust him. If he opens his career door, oh, then I'll trust him. But what if the deeper question is he enough? The tree by the river doesn't panic in a drought. Why? Because the river hasn't moved. If our joy rises and falls based on our circumstances, that's not just stress, that's a root issue. Jeremiah teaches us something else. He teaches us that sometimes prosperity is just as dangerous as a drought. The desert bush will not see prosperity when it comes, even if it rains. It doesn't fundamentally change. I think some people get the thing they finally wanted, right? The relationship, the promotion, the financial breakthrough, the recognition, the cure. And instead of fulfillment, they ride a high for a moment and then boom, they experience emptiness because rain cannot replace a river. If our roots are in money, well, more money won't fix us. If your roots are in approval, well, more approval won't satisfy you. Only the river sustains. And Jeremiah identifies the river clearly. The Lord, the spring of living water. So if sin is misplaced trust, if it is putting our roots somewhere other than God, how do we get replanted? Right? That's the question, right? How do I get replanted then if I'm in that place? Heal me, Lord, and I will be healed. There is only one way to be moved from the desert to the living water. We've seen what sin does. It spreads like yeast. We've seen where sin begins. It grows from misplaced roots. Now let's keep going even deeper, because I think at the core of sin is not just rebellion. It's not just weakness. It's not even just ignorance. I think at the core, sin is the proud denial of grace. Let's go back to the moment that made Jesus sigh. The Pharisees came to him. They've been going to question him, to test him. They asked him for a sign from heaven. He sighed deeply and said, "Why does this generation ask for a sign? Truly, I tell you, you will not be given one." I don't know that this is a sigh of irritation, right? I think this is a sigh of grief. The Pharisees had already seen miracles. They had already witnessed healings. They had heard his teaching, yet they demanded more proof. Why? Because the issue was never evidence. The issue was pride. They didn't want the Messiah Jesus was. They wanted a Messiah who fit their expectation. They wanted the strong, politically active, the person who validates their religious authority. Jesus came as a Messiah of grace. He came to forgive sinners, not to congratulate the self-righteous. And that's why they rejected him. Again, this can be really sobering. You can be super religious and still be infected with yeast. The Pharisees fasted, they tithed, they memorized scripture, they led worship, but they didn't see their need for grace. We're fine. Everyone else is the problem. Everyone else needs saving. It's the yeast of pride, and I think that pride spreads in two directions. I think one kind says, I'm too good for grace, and the other kind says, I'm too bad for grace, and both of them are forms of pride. The first one kind of ends up saying, like, God owes me. The second one ends up saying, God couldn't want me. And they both reject grace. When it comes to the first kind of pride, I think it's more like, it sounds like, I've been a good person. I give, I try, God should come through for me. And when life doesn't go as planned, disappointment turns into bitterness. Start to demand signs. God, if you fix this, then I'll start trusting you more. Then I'll really start giving my life to you. I think that mindset assumes God is in our debt. Other people who struggle with that second kind, I think they think, I've messed up too much. I fail too deeply. I've wandered too far. I don't deserve grace. But grace isn't something we deserve. It's something we receive. And both kinds of pride miss the greatest sign ever given. They're all asking for a sign. We got a sign. The cross. We got to remember that what Jesus would eventually do, the ultimate sign, the Son of God giving his life, my life for yours. That's the opposite of the yeast of pride. The yeast of pride says your life or mine. The cross says my life for yours. I think when we see that clearly, it changes everything. If we make anything a condition of faith, then that thing is our real trust. That thing is our water source. And no human relationship can bear the weight of being your river. Only Christ can. Jesus refused to give the Pharisees the kind of sign they demanded, not because he lacked the power, but because no sign would ever satisfy their proud hearts. If grace is rejected, evidence will never be enough. I think some people get restless or dissatisfied. They're wanting change, but if I just had this clarity, if I just had this confirmation, I've just had this one prayer answered. But again, what if the real question is not whether has God proven himself? What if the real question is, have we received the sign already? And the cross declares, yes, you have. You are loved, you are pursued, you are forgiven, you are invited. The yeast of pride keeps asking God for more. Grace says this is enough. I want to look at one last story that kind of shows this picture perfectly. Mark 7, just the chapter before this, you have this woman who understands grace far better than the religious leaders of the day did. Starting in verse 25, it says, in fact, as soon as she heard about him, a woman whose little daughter was possessed by an impure spirit came and fell at his feet. The woman was a Greek born in Syria, Phoenicia. She begged Jesus to drive the demon out of her daughter. First, let the children eat all they want, he told her, for it is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Whew. Lord, she replied, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. Then he told her, for such a reply, you may go. The demon has left your daughter. She went home, found her child lying in bed, and the demon gone. I think this is one of the more startling conversations in the gospel. I think people are really like, whoa. This woman is not Jewish. She is an outsider. She has no covenant claim, no religious credentials, right? No standing. She comes because her daughter is suffering, and Jesus responds with language that sounds super harsh, right? He says it's not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. Well, he's referring to the priority of his mission, to Israel first, to a prophecy that needed to be fulfilled. But watch her response. She doesn't argue for her worthiness. She doesn't demand a sign. She doesn't claim status. She says, even the dogs under the table eat the children's crumbs. That's humility and boldness at the same time. She admits, I'm not entitled, but she also declares, you are generous. That's grace-rooted faith. The Pharisees demanded bread as proof. She demanded crumbs as mercy. The Pharisee said, prove yourself. She said, I know who you are. The Pharisees rejected grace because they felt too good for it. She embraced grace because she knew she was not good enough. And Jesus responds immediately, I got you. Why? Because she understood grace. This woman shows us what uprooted pride looks like. She doesn't deny her unworthiness, but she also doesn't wallow in shame. She doesn't collapse in self-hatred. She doesn't get offended by Jesus' statement. She simply trusts in the generosity of Jesus. I think a lot of churches today swing between those two extremes, minimizing sin and crushed by it. But grace produces something different. It produces humble confidence. If we connect that to the roots, the tree by the river, when we're rooted in grace, we don't panic when we fail. When we're rooted in grace, we don't pretend we're flawless. When we're rooted in grace, we don't collapse when we're criticized. We can be wrong. It's okay. We don't demand proof of what. We're the people who say, your crumbs, even the crumbs from you are enough. And what makes this moment even more powerful is she didn't even know yet what Jesus was going to do, that he would become the bread. She didn't know that he would become broken, so there'd be so much more than crumbs for everyone. Jesus later said, I'm the bread of life. Whoever comes to me will never go hungry. and never be thirsty. He's the bread, but bread must be broken. On the cross, Jesus was broken, so there'd be more than enough for Gentiles and Jews and weak and strong alike, right? So I want to ask you something gently but directly. How do you come to God? How do you come? Do you come negotiating? Do you come demanding? Do you come with conditions? Or do you come by saying, Lord, even the crumbs would be enough? You know, humility without boldness becomes despair, and boldness without humility becomes arrogance, but grace produces both together. The woman didn't say, I deserve it. She didn't say, I'm worthless. She said, you're merciful. And that's the heart of the healed. So we've seen yeast spreading, we've seen roots misplaced, we've seen pride exposed, we've seen grace received, and there's just one last final question. If our hearts are deceitful, if sin spreads quietly, if our roots drift towards lesser things, how do we stay planted by the river? How do we prevent the yeast from taking over? The answer is not willpower. I'm going to tell you that right now. It is replanting. That brings us to the cure. Jeremiah cries out in this passage, heal me, Lord, and I will be healed. Save me, and I will be saved, for you are the one that I praise. That's not the prayer of someone managing behavior. That is a prayer of someone who knows their roots are the issue. We don't need minor adjustments. We need replanting. Jeremiah told us the heart is deceitful above all things, beyond cure. That sounds hopeless. That sounds like really heavy and really dark. Well, it is until you realize it's saying that this cure is beyond man. It's beyond people. We cannot uproot ourselves. A desert bush cannot pick itself up and walk over to the river and then plant itself. It must be planted, and that is exactly what God does through grace. The gospel is not self-improvement. It's transplantation. When we trust in God, we stop demanding signs. We stop negotiating. We stop defending ourselves and simply receive grace. God lifts us up from the desert soil and plants us by the river. So how does that happen? Well, first, we become honest about sin. That's what a lot of this series has been. It's hard. It's uncomfortable. No one wants to talk about this. No one wants to be up here like, I'm the worst. I did this wrong. I did this wrong. We don't want to do that. You go on social media, no one's on there like, oh man, I argued with my wife today and I was really rude to my children and I was the person that was driving like a jerk. No one's on there doing that. No one wants to admit that stuff. But we have to be honest about it because it's not just behavior, it's misplaced trust that is these problems. We have to ask ourselves, what am I rooting my identity in? What am I afraid of losing? What outcome has become of my condition of faith? Second, we meditate on Christ's substitution. The cure for yeast is not denial, it's removal. And by the way, if you've ever had yeast mixed into dough, you know you cannot unmix it. You can't. So it requires a supernatural process for this to happen. It requires the power of Jesus. When you meditate on that, who he is, not casually but deeply, it begins to change you. Paul prayed this for the Ephesians. He says he prays so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being what? Rooted. Thanks, Wayne. And established in love, may have power together with all the Lord's holy people to grasp how wide and long and high and deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Roots again. Even Christians need to grow closer to the river. Being planted by the river doesn't mean you never feel the heat. It means that the heat does not define you, doesn't own you, doesn't destroy you. You know, Jesus gave us a really, really beautiful promise. Whoever believes in me, oh, wow, look at this. As Scripture has said, rivers of living water will flow from them. You are going to get to become the river. Look at that. How about that? That means you're not just surviving the drought, you are becoming a source of water for others. Man, imagine if Canyon Church became that for the whole community that they're in, all the places. Imagine that. Wouldn't that be something else? Not anxious, not reactionary, not brittle, not defensive, rooted, steady, green in drought, bearing fruit in every season. Man, people are thirsty. People are thirsty. But rain is not going to sustain them. Career rain, political rain, relational rain, money rain, whatever it is. We know the river. We're planted by it. For bearing fruit, others will see the difference. Jesus said, watch out for the yeast. Jeremiah said, trust in the Lord. The woman said, even the crumbs are enough. And the cross says, my life for yours. So we have a choice today and every day. Are we going to let the yeast spread? Will we keep roots in desert soil? Will we demand signs? Will we negotiate grace? Or will we just say, Lord, heal me? Not just my circumstances, my heart. Replant me. Anchor me in you. If you do that, if we do that, the drought will not destroy us because we're rooted in the living water. Cool, right? Hey, we don't just have to have baptisms on Super Bowl Sunday. We can do it anytime. So I'm told. If anybody hasn't been baptized, there's living water ready for you. We'd love that. If you're out here and you're feeling the drought, you're feeling like it's not raining in your life, you're not getting water, you're not being sustained, don't leave. Don't leave. Guys, we got Men's Heart after this. This is an awesome place to be. Lunch is provided. But ladies too, anyone in here, don't leave. This is a church who doesn't want to shame you. They want to love you. They want to uplift you. They want to help you get on the path that you and God need you to be on. Amen. If anyone needs anything, come, let it be known as we stand and sing.